have you all here for this one. At Denver Startup Week, we strive to make all of our sessions a space where attendees can connect, learn, and grow, regardless of their gender identity, gender expression, race, ability, sexual orientation, and the combination of those identities all together. There is something for everyone at Denver Startup Week. Thank you for joining us to make it happen. So before we kick off in this session, I'm going to turn it back over to Jay for a quick message from Capital One Cafe. I think I'm turning it over to Jay for a quick message from Capital One Cafe. Here we go. Awesome.
Hey everybody, it's Ben Higgins here. I am a proud Denver resident. I have been for the last 8 years, and I love Denver. I've called it home for the last 8 years because I love the people, I love the creativity, I love the activity, and I love where the city is going. But I also get the privilege of welcoming all of you to Denver Startup Week's Product Track session, brought to you by the one and only Capital One. Was a small business owner myself. I have a few restaurants and a few businesses there in Denver, actually. I'm proud to partner with Capital One to celebrate all things entrepreneurship, especially during these unprecedented times. So, for all of you out there, enjoy this session, and I look forward to connecting with all of you very soon.
Awesome. Thank you to Capital One for that. They're the ones that help us keep Denver Startup Week free and accessible for everybody. So without further ado, this panel is focusing on leveraging data and customer feedback to iterate upon your product. And I'm excited to introduce Steven as the session organizer, and he's got an awesome panel of people, of experts ready to talk about how to help you iterate on your product. So Steven, welcome.
Thanks, Ryan. It's a pleasure to be here. I am going to share my screen now. As soon as I give it permissions. Shoot. I'm going to have to jump off. I'll be back in 1 second.
It's too bad Ben Higgins isn't here for a little bit more about Capital One, I guess. That's okay. Sorry, everybody. Just a little technical glitch. We'll get Steven back on here in a second. Unless, John, did you want to pull up the slides to help get going?
I can, yeah. If I have access to do that, let me try that real quick. Is that working?
Yep. We can see it, and it's up to you. If you want to wait for Steven, that's all good. But if you want to jump in and get going, that's we can get on our way.
Sure. Yeah. Did Steven jump off, or is he there? Just
he's not back yet. Although he just popped back on, so there he is.
Oh, there he is. Okay. Hey, Steven.
Hey, sorry about that. Obviously, technical difficulties. Who's driving?
I am. Although I can relinquish that if you want to share.
You're good. Or I can do it. There we go.
Go ahead.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks everyone for your patience. Yeah. So welcome. We're really glad to be here today. Us in the panel. This is the Denver Startup Week Product Track, and we're really excited to talk to you today about our topic. So we're talking about leveraging data and customer feedback to quickly iterate upon your product. I'm super passionate about this, and I'm hoping you are too. And I think at the end of the day, you will be as well. We're practitioners here, both myself and the panel, working in the trenches on product and how to make product better. And part of that is using data and customer feedback to really learn quickly and iterate upon your product and your product success. So this format today is going to be, we're going to pack a lot into this hour. We've already had kind of an intro, or we'll have introductions to the session, and you'll get to meet the panelists. We'll then have a lightning round of presentations where each panelist will talk for about 10 minutes to give you really practical tips and tricks on practicing product and getting data and feedback to iterate on your roadmap. These are going to be really tangible. We want you to be able to walk away with at least 3 to 5 really good tools in your tool belt. And we'll actually make those slides available at the end so that you can leverage the resources. Lastly, we'll talk, actually have a free panel discussion where we'll ask the panel different questions as far as how do you iterate upon your product roadmap? What are some bumps you've run into along the way? What are some pros? What are some cons? And all that good stuff. And then finally, we do have some audience feedback available at the end. So please put in the message your feedback and your messages in your Q&A, and we will try to get to at least a couple of them at the very end. So leveraging data and customer feedback is kind of like an art and a science. It's scientific from the standpoint that there are tools that you can use out there that we'll talk to you a little bit about today. There's some processes, there's some workflows that are really, really helpful to follow, and models that are already pre-built. But at the same time, there's an artistic form to it. Every product's a little different, just like every person's a little different. And solving one person's problem doesn't mean you're solving another person's problem. So it's a beautiful blend between art and science, and really bringing those two together to find the areas where there's oversection, interlap, and really bring that out to light and to iterate on your product. With great power also comes great responsibility. Netflix just put out a really interesting docuseries, documentary just this past week about the big tech companies and the social networks. And they've come to perfect a lot of these techniques that we're going to talk to today. And while these are great techniques, there's also a tendency to where positive alignment gets unkiltered, and we might use these tools actually to even cause harm as opposed to good. So I really want to challenge everyone here today. We're going to teach you some really cool tools and really cool tricks. Maybe watch the documentary for yourself. I thought it was really well done. But overall, we want to use these tools for forces of good and help enrich our customers' lives. And so with that, we'll have the panelists speak about themselves, and I'll start with John to provide his intro.
Thanks, Stephen. Hey, everyone. I wish I could actually see your faces, but yeah, I'm excited to be here. So a little bit about me. I've, being a tech geek, I've had the privilege of working in software tech for the last 19 years, and have just been fortunate to work across multiple industries and launch products across pretty much every major platform imaginable, which has been a lot of fun. And last year I started my own company called Modern Product, which is a product management services company that helps software companies build better products more efficiently, basically leveraging data-informed practices or best practices. And so I'm excited to share some of the things that I do with my clients on a day-to-day basis today. Thanks.
Great, I'm Andrea Joya, and I'm a senior product manager at Healthgrades, leading our platform team as well as our telehealth solutions. And I love product as it blends with many different functions. It requires a lot of different skill sets. It always keeps you on edge. There's something new and exciting to learn. And I hope to share some of the tools with you today in an effort to share that passion for product and get you excited about what we do.
Awesome. And my name is Bergen DeVell. I am a senior product manager at Ibotta. I also work with our platform team over on the Ibotta side of things. And my career in product management started on the mobile side at ADT Home Security Services. I, like John, have had the opportunity to work in a couple of different industries. Before coming over to Ibotta, I was able to work with the computer vision team on some data science projects. So similar to Andrea, really enjoy this role. I love working with different stakeholders, and really the point of this talk, understanding consumers and understanding what consumers are looking for in terms of what we can build with technology. So with that, I will dive right into the first lightning talk. Okay, so each of us are going to kind of take a different talk track around customer research and customer feedback and how to use that within your individual products. In regards to my section, I'm going to be talking about design thinking. And so we're going to call this 10 minutes together, Design Thinking 101. So I'll be providing you with an overview of design thinking and some details on the 5-step process. And then, as Stephen mentioned, we'll be providing these slides after, but it'll include some resources for you to put this into practice in your organization. So with that said, we'll dive right in. So design thinking, for those of you that are not familiar with the concept, is a human-centric approach to evolve your existing products and generate ideas to serve your customers better. This was originally pioneered by the Stanford D School. So if you find what you hear today interesting, I really encourage you to go check out their website. They have a lot of virtual classes you can take and ultimately get certified in this way of thinking and in this practice. In regards to my experience with design thinking, I had the opportunity to put this process into place in a previous role at Verizon. We did a bunch of research on navigation tools and recognized that there was a gap in the technology available for individuals with mobility challenges. Mapping tools will get us from A to B, but they do lack detailed information for what we were calling the last mile of a user's journey. So imagine showing up to Cherry Creek Mall and not knowing where to park, where to find accessible crosswalks or accessible doors in order to get to your final destination. So the goal for us was to create an integrated navigation and wayfinding solution, enabling consumers with these mobility challenges to get safely and accurately from door to door. In order to determine what we needed to build, we needed to understand our potential users and identify their wants and needs before building anything, because as I'm sure many of you are familiar, engineering time is rather costly. The images on this slide outline different parts of the design thinking process. And since our time is limited today, we'll talk about the 5 steps. And again, we'll include these resources for you to put this in practice in your organization. So with that, let's dive right in. Great. The first step of the design thinking process is to empathize. This stage includes going out and talking to your users or your potential users. The goal is to conduct interviews, shadow individuals in their daily life, and really just spend time understanding your consumers' needs. Oftentimes people will tell you what they want, but by spending time with these consumers in their natural environment, you'll typically uncover unmet needs that your product can solve. Users are far more likely to purchase or engage with a product that solves their needs versus their wants. And one tool you can use during this phase is an empathy map. So if you want to jump to the next slide. Thank you. An empathy map is traditionally split into these 4 quadrants, with the user or persona in the middle. The 4 quadrants will include things that the user says, thinks, does, and feels. The example in this slide reflects the TV buying process for a consumer. Things that they may say things that indicate how they feel about the process, like the fact that they think it's overwhelming. Empathy maps provide a glance into who a user is as a whole and provides you with the visualization used to articulate what you know about a particular type of user. So once you understand your users, the next step is to define your problem statement. In this step, the goal is to consolidate your observations gathered in step 1 and synthesize them into a singular problem statement that'll be used in the subsequent steps. You really should strive to make your problem-centric or statement human-centric. So in the case of my project, we determined that over 200 million consumers in the US are impacted by mobility challenges. And our problem statement was that these consumers lack the resources to get safely and accurately from door to door. I want to emphasize that steps 1 and 2 are typically done prior to what's called a design thinking workshop. I would encourage PMs to do these steps 1 and 2 independently, and then pull in a cross-functional team to participate in the workshop. These backgrounds can vary from engineering to design to legal, accounting. The more backgrounds, the better. And equipped with your problem statement and your personas, you can collaborate with these individuals to complete steps 3 through 5. So step 3 on the next slide is to ideate. So during this step, the idea is really that no idea is a bad idea. You've got your group together for the workshop. You'll provide them with the audience with an overview of your personas and the associated problem statement, which you can see here on the left. So I mentioned the problem statement, but Cindy was one of our primary personas after spending some time with her in her day-to-day life in New York City. And you're going to pull up details around her life, her wants and needs, and her attitude and style. So a typical persona. With this information in mind, the goal is to identify new solutions to the problem statement you've created and look for alternative ways of viewing the problem. There are literally hundreds of ideation techniques to employ during this stage, and examples of those will be provided in the resources slide. But one technique I particularly like during this stage is storyboarding. Storyboarding is an excellent technique for bringing a design challenge to life and exploring avenues in a visual way. You'll start by drawing out your personas, as defined in the empathize and research stages, and use images and quotes to paint a vivid picture. From there, you can draw out various storylines and outcomes, visualizing how the user feels throughout. Awesome. So on the next slide, we'll talk about the last two steps here in parallel. For me, prototyping is really where the magic happens. In this stage, you take ideas from step 3 and mock up what these features could look like. The goal is to start with very low fidelity mockups and continually to refine the mockups as you gather feedback. I'd encourage you to start by collecting feedback from individuals within your organization or within your network. You'll use this feedback to tweak your mockups before moving to step 5. As step 5 involves putting these prototypes in front of your potential consumers to determine if what you've come up with will actually solve their needs. I want to emphasize that this is not a one and done conversation. It's likely that the first time you put these mockups in front of a user, you'll learn a handful of things that you really hadn't considered or things that you hadn't thought of. Be open to this feedback and use it to iterate and refine the initial prototypes. After going through this cycle a few times, you can move into more high fidelity clickable prototypes via tools like InVision or Figma. And once you've gathered the feedback on the clickable prototypes, I'd encourage you to move into the planning and scoping phase with engineering. All right, so on the last slide, as I mentioned, there are a few resources included here for you to get started on your design thinking journey. I encourage you to focus on steps 1 and 2, which is to understand your existing or potential users, because without this fundamental understanding, it's challenging to create best-in-class products. So with that, I hope you found some of this helpful and are able to put some of this into place in your organization. And I'll turn it over to Andrea.
Great, thank you. All right, so I want to talk about some A/B testing here. A/B testing is a common way teams measure different variations to see what performs the best. So if you have a control, that's great, you have that baseline, but otherwise you can still test multiple variations to learn more about your product. So as you probably have found, many product teams have dependencies on other teams. And so what a tool like LaunchDarkly does, it allows you to release to production behind feature flags or with just a percentage of your traffic to test and learn. So turn things on at any time, you can scale up and down quickly. It's really a great toggle feature that you can use to release when you want to or when you need to. Here's an example of when we used this recently. We designed a new calendar that allows patients to book appointments with doctors online. Our success metrics were based on conversion rates. So while we were testing this, we had to make sure that the new calendar was at least as good as or better than our previous calendar. Initially, we set up our traffic so that 25% of our traffic would go to the new calendar, 75% was going to the old calendar. Then we scaled it up to 50-50 and then eventually 100%. Our initial assumption was that we could scale these up at a regular interval, but this was during COVID-19. And what we were finding was some interesting information that LaunchDarkly gave us insight into, and that providers were not wanting new calendars because they weren't able to see their patients, and patients were really hesitant to go into any kind of doctor's offices. So we did some additional research with our clients and found that they were open to telehealth appointments. So we pivoted and added telehealth appointment types and links throughout our site that would allow our patients to book telehealth appointments with these providers. Ultimately, LaunchDarkly gave us the additional insight to what was happening and allowed us to quickly and easily throttle our traffic based on what our findings were, what was happening in the industry. There are a lot of competitors in this space, so I encourage you to look into this if this interests you, but it's a very helpful tool. Let's go to the next one, user testing. User testing is a way to test your user experiences. So the idea with usertesting.com is that users are going to walk through prototypes that you build and explain what they're thinking. So you get their thoughts, but they're verbally describing it to you. So you're going to set up your target audience based on whatever that profile looks like. And then you can have various prototypes that they walk through and you give them a task to do, and then you see what happens. So an example, let's say that you are developing the login screen for an account. the task you might ask the user to perform is, how would you sign up for an account? And then you sit back and you watch what happens. What does the user do? Where does their mouse go? Where are they getting cut up? And how do they figure it out? You can take notes along the way and ultimately share those with your colleagues, and you can review these recordings for future. What really differentiates this tool is that verbal information that they're giving you. You can pick up on seemingly small things that may seem insignificant, but actually play a pretty big role. Here's an example. Let's say that the user's been asked to complete a task, sign into a new account. And while they're performing this task, at some point they say, hang on a sec, I gotta grab my glasses, you know. If you were using another tool, like a snap tool, while those are important and very helpful, in this case, it might just look like inactivity for 20 seconds while they grab their glasses. But a tool like this, where they're recording what they're saying verbally as well, picks up on, hey, maybe my text is too small. And so you can see from this, you could run additional tests to see for your target audience, what is the correct size of text where they're not grabbing their glasses in the middle of your user testing session. As you become more familiar with these tests, you'll hone your questions so that you can optimize the helpfulness of your results. Your results are only as good as how good your questions are. So you get a lot better at that. There are a few competitors in this industry as well, so you can take a look. All right, so let's go to the next one. What if you don't have a budget to work with? You know, you don't have the money, it needs to be free, or maybe you need information right now. Great, let's be scrappy. First, you have to develop your success metrics. You have to know what success looks like before you invest your time, energy, money into developing these products. So what does success look like? What kind of decisions need to be made, and what helps make that decision? How is it going to be measured? Is it the definition of done? I encourage you to take this a step further. I learned the hard way early in my career, where I started at a company, hit the ground running, nailed it, right out of the park. Everything worked as intended and no one used it. There was no homework, no research done based on what the user actually wanted. So take it from me, challenge the success metrics, get to that win condition, not only for your client, but for their clients, right? They ultimately have clients that they're trying to get to as well. Also, side note, success metrics are living, they're changing. As you get more information, they will change. I would expect that to happen. Here's an example of where I had to be scrappy. We didn't have a budget, but we were looking into a concierge service where a patient could submit an online appointment request to see a doctor. A call center would then pick up the request and book the doctor appointment on behalf of the patient. So we wanted to know, would the doctor's office even accept appointment requests from a call center? What concerns did they have? How could we ensure HIPAA compliance? Would they even answer the phone? That day, I called 30 practices and I learned more than I bargained for, but it gave us insight to what information are they going to require to book an appointment? So what needs to be on that form that we're building? What kind of specialties are valid for a concierge booking? You know, some doctors require you to have a referral from another doctor. And ultimately, we worked together to develop some SLAs so that we could help set the expectations with our patients. You know, when could they expect a confirmation email of their appointment time? It was enough information to warrant a test, train our call center on how to perform these requests, and measure our success. All in all, there are many ways to get the information you need. First, you have to determine your success, find creative ways to get the information you need, test and analyze, and then iterate based on your findings. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Andrea. So I'm going to talk about strategic efficiency with your analytics today. And so whether you're introducing a new product to market or you're iterating on a product that's already in market, what really matters is how quickly you can come to an understanding of what your customers are doing in your product. And so what I hope to do over the next few minutes is just provide some practical advice on how to achieve that efficiency, which can then lead to more effective impacts to your roadmap and decisions that you make for your roadmap. So to get started, the TLDR here really comes down to three things. Number one is to drive value from analytics from day one of your product introduction to market. And you can do that by backing into your metrics with a top-down strategic approach. And then the third thing here is just to remember that you can always evolve your data-informed approaches, just like you evolve your product. So if we get started, step one here is to identify your strategic goals. And to do this, you can leverage any North Star, quote unquote, documentation that clarifies what those goals are. Those could be strategic briefs, they could be MRDs, or even corporate goals like OKRs. And as a product manager, what you need to do is be able to take those goals and then translate those into essentially what your product needs to achieve in order to fulfill those goals. So I'm going to start and use an example through the rest of my lightning talk here that's sort of loosely based on some client work that I've done recently with my clients. But this example takes an OKR that states, introduce a new in-app paid subscription flow to market that results in 50% lift in average revenue per active user. So with that, some things pop out, right? We're talking about active users, we're looking at average revenue and really impacting that through a new flow. Okay, so if we go to step two is all about designing the very specific analytics reports that you're going to need to achieve those goals. And so what this really involves is much like what you might be doing with product, where you wireframe and spec out what you're going to build. Same thing can be applied to your analytics reports or the data visualizations that you're going to need. And so work with your team and also work with your stakeholders to really decide what are the visualizations that you're going to need. And one bit of advice that I would put forward here is to, as you're designing out what visualizations you're going to use, is to not forget about how you might want to drill into your data using segmentation or filtering. Because that will essentially make things more efficient when you actually go to build out these things. And then, as product managers, always ensure that you have alignment up and down the chain with your team and your stakeholders about what analytics you're actually going to build and what you're going to use in order to track your progress. So coming back to this example here, some of the reporting needs that we determined we needed right out of the gate really came down to two visualizations. One was a conversion funnel that really outlined core activity of the users early in their experience, their product experience, and then what led them into a subscription funnel flow. And the second was just an average revenue per user trending chart over time. And with those, we would be able to track and measure the effectiveness of this new experience in market. From a segmentation perspective, we thought it would be really interesting to create these analytics, but then be able to not just look in aggregate across all subscription flow traffic, but actually be able to drill into users that were interested in different tiers within the subscription experience or offerings. And then as the OKR mentioned, we were talking about active users. We thought it might be interesting to be able to look at behaviors of other users, like lapsed users and whatnot as well. So once you have those wireframes in place, you can move to step three, which is all about, again, backing into those very specific metrics that you need in order to build those very strategic reports. And this is where you can coordinate with your team to instrument within the product whatever those specific metrics are. And it really depends on what tools you're using, whether it's Google Analytics or Adobe Analytics or X, Y, and Z. But just a few examples of types of metrics that you could consider tracking would include user actions like click tracking, page views or screen views, and then even app generated events like error messaging and whatnot. And then once you have those spec'd out, you can build your reports while you have the team instrumenting your code. You start to collect data that you can then hook up to your reports. And one piece of advice here is just if you're planning on doing a beta program or an early access program for your product, use that as an opportunity to actually test drive the analytics reporting that you're also working on. So with our example here of the two visualizations that we wanted to create, there was a very specific set of metrics that we had instrumented into our code that related to purchase flow, screen views and drop-offs, selection events such as what were users actually, like what pricing tiers were users picking, and then into transaction events such as literally putting in their credit card info and all of the form fields that need to be filled out when you're making a purchase. And then of course the revenue dollars, the transactions that were going, so that we could look at average revenue over time. And then from a segmentation perspective, we built in user attributes related to their status, like active, and we were tracking subscription type selections as well. So with all of that, if you go to the next slide, that's really the beginning of the race, is to get your product to market. And so the name of the game really is to move as soon as you can into a rapid data-informed optimization process with your team. And to do that by leveraging the data that you have day one to identify what are the hot spots within your product that are really strategically critical, that you get right, essentially. And this is where I'll sort of try to tie everything that Bergen and Andrea talked about previously, which is, in my experience, the best sort of 1-2 punch that you can have in terms of improving your product and market is to really combine or blend your quantitative analytics data with your qualitative or observational data, just to be able to not just see where in aggregate are problems happening, but why are they happening as well. And so, with this example here, day one, we launched this new subscription flow with some very simple analytics visualizations, but they were very keyed into our strategic goal. And over time, we've been able to evolve what analytics and dashboarding and visualizations we're using. And you can apply the same approach with your own products. So to conclude, if you go to the next slide, it's really just to remember that there's 3 things here that I'm hoping to convey in terms of advice. Number 1 is always drive value from your analytics from day one of your product introduction. Do that by backing into your metrics with a top-down strategic approach. And then always remember that you can evolve your data-informed practices just like you evolve your product. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Bergen. This was great. Let me stop sharing my screen for a second. And we'll kind of go into more of just our panelist discussion time. Like I mentioned earlier at the beginning, you're welcome to ask any questions in the chat, and we will try to grab those at the end as well. So we've got some kind of already pre-thought of questions, but we also want to invite you, the panelists, or the audience, to also ask away. So this question kind of hits at the heart as far as the industry goes with data and leveraging it for products. And that is, how is the collection of data and using it to make product decisions, how has that changed over the last 5 years? What do you guys predict will happen in the next 5 to 10 years, given everything that's happened in the last 5 years and forward?
I can start that one off. I have found that there are a lot more tools in the space to use to help inform product development over the last 5 years. That said, I've had a lot less budget to work with in the last 5 years, so I've had to become more intentional and creative in my testing. But as far as what's happening in the future, next 5 years, there's a lot in the industry going on with AI. What can we be doing with, some automated testing so that it really eases that? And I think we're going to see another jump in really helpful product development tools.
Yeah, just to weigh in on that. In terms of like A/B testing, there's so many tools available today to completely differentiate the experiences that you're putting in front of your users to really get that feedback directly in regards to new features that you might be rolling out, you can create two completely different experiences within a mobile app and put those in front of consumers and get feedback in near real time. So I think it makes the mobile experience much easier to iterate on more quickly. And I think getting that feedback loop has certainly kind of shortened in regards to having to put out a test flight build and maybe put that into the app store, wait for a feature to be out there for a couple of weeks before you have data to analyze. Now you're able to get all of that insight in real time in certain dashboards that you might have available to you. So I think it's easier to make decisions a lot faster given the data that we are getting through A/B testing and directly from our consumers.
That's great. I'll just add to that. I agree with everything Andrea and Bergen had mentioned, and just say that what I've noticed over the last 5 years has been this pretty impressive infrastructural set of offerings. All these tools that have come out, they all tie together so neatly with your AWSs of the world and Google Clouds of the world and whatnot. And so big data and analysis of that data, how data flows through your pipelines, that's been really impressive. And then as both Andrea and Bergen mentioned, on the AI sort of predictive analytics side of things, I think that's where over the next 5 to 10 years, what I'd love to see is more and more of that sort of plug and play, just drop in, I don't know what it is, like check a box or hit a button and automatically have, your not just your predictive analytics, but maybe your predictive feature sets in your products that are just turnkey, which I think would be pretty amazing.
I would say just even in lieu of all the technology that we'll have available to us to do all this testing, don't ever lose sight of your end consumer. I think the more tools that we have in front of our fingertips or behind our computer screens makes it harder to get out of your working environment and still having those interactions and those touch points with your consumers. So as technology is getting easier to get these answers, but I still think there's a lot of value in that human interaction, and maybe not right now, but in 6 months or 9 months from now, when you can go talk to a user in a coffee shop and still have those conversations, I still just think there's so much value that you can derive from those face-to-face interactions with your end consumers. And it's difficult to make the case to spend that time outside of the office, but some of the insights that you'll glean are really invaluable, I think. So even with all these tools, don't lose sight of who your personas are and try to fundamentally understand those people.
Do you guys see that now? I mean, do you see in your space how sometimes we use the tool rather than actually getting out of the office type of experience? I mean, we just talked about usertesting.com, A/B testing with LaunchDarkly, and there's a handful of tools like that. I mean, right now there's a lot of tools that could keep us from ever getting outside of the office, let alone in 10 years from now, right? So I guess to you guys, how do you know what the balance is? How do you make sure you don't get oversaturated with being, tool inundated without, at the same time using tools appropriately and really talking to real customers? How do you guys balance that?
I'll throw out there, I've found it to sometimes be a function of budget and time versus going deep and having the opportunity to go deep. And in some cases that's unfortunate that you have to make those choices, but some of these tools like Andrea talked about, usertesting.com, are really great to be able to do just quick bursts of outreach and get some quick data, and in a lot of cases that's just fine, and you get a lot of good insights. But if going back to what Bergen mentioned, if I had the luxury of doing real interviews and real observational studies, even in users' own environments, I have always found that to be far superior in terms of the types of insights that you can glean.
Yeah, I think and it depends on your role within the organization, your role within the product org within your organization. I mean, on the platform side of things right now, the users for my team are other developers within our organization. So I try to make a point to even sit in on some of the front end research that our teams are doing, or our user testing teams are doing, and our research teams are doing, just so I don't lose sight of the end consumer of the Ibotta mobile app. So I think it's just making a case for it, putting blocks of time on your calendar to participate in those sessions, and really advocating for that across your product organization. The better you know that your consumer, the better products you can build for them. So I think it's just trying to make a point of making time for it, because it is difficult to, once you kind of hit your day-to-day stride or day-to-day schedules or meetings pop up, it's easy for that to fall off your calendar. But I would say, like, if you could maybe meet with either through usertesting.com or through a direct conversation, at least a couple hours a month, just so you don't lose sight of who you're building your product for.
I think another somewhat built-in product, we're currently using Jira, and that's how we take in a lot of requests. And if you're getting the same request over and over again, that's a clear shining star. This needs attention. Sometimes it's as simple as recognizing and just being aware. Someone asked that same question last week, or we're doing this manual load every single month. What can we do to automate it? Sometimes those integrated tools that we're already using can be telling.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate that. Another question. This is this is at the heart of product management in a lot of ways. So, as product managers, our job is to take data, customer research, and funnel it to engineering sides of the organization all the way up to top management leadership in the organization. How do you guys find a way to provide and frame your research in a way that makes it up to those levels? And then how do you, to be kind to our top level executives, how do you provide useful pushback and feedback when the executives might not have the exact same data you have? How do you help them see what you're seeing, so that decisions that are being made are made with data backing them up, as opposed to more gut level intuition? How do you guys go about that? I feel like that's a really big issue that a lot of people within product face daily, to be honest.
I can take this one first. So I love this question. It's very real. And I think it can apply to not only leadership, but other stakeholders in general, certainly leadership. And what I think has been most helpful for me is speak in their terms, figure out what they care about. What OKRs are they always talking about on every call? What are the slogans, the buzzwords that they're using? Speak in those terms. How is this product going to meet their OKRs? Or sometimes they have this brilliant idea they thought of last night at a dinner party and they suddenly changed position. So how do you go about pushing back on that? Another way to think about that is, go ahead, do your research, show how it will or maybe will not hit their OKRs, but actually what is the opportunity cost? So by doing this feature, what other things are not going to get done? Sometimes that's what it takes to see the whole picture. And sometimes, if they're on board with it and we want to take this risk, sometimes those are the best risks to take. But do your homework and know your opportunity costs so that everybody sees the whole field and you can march toward that together.
Yeah, that's a really great answer. Just to elaborate on an OKR and objectives and key results for those that maybe haven't used those in your organization. But I encourage you to, if your team is providing some of the technical backend for some of those front end features or front end OKR or end consumer OKRs, like growing your active user base, having 50, as John mentioned, 50% of your users on a paid subscription model, I would encourage you to partner with other teams if your team is providing some of the backbone to what they're going to be driving in the mobile experience, and create those shared OKRs across your team. Oftentimes, if you're working with a platform squad, for example, you're providing some of the nitty-gritty backend to these experiences upstream, but by sharing those objectives and key results with other front-end squads, it helps some of the executives or non-technical stakeholders understand how your work is contributing to the overall goals and goals of your organization. So that's something that we've started to put into place more recently within our teams at Ibotta, is as teams have shared or are delivering towards the same end experience, making sure that those OKRs are shared across multiple groups, because it'll help you on the platform or more technical side of things get buy-in for those features that you're proposing on your roadmap.
I think it's great. Yeah, I don't have much to add. I would just throw up a couple of things. One is the importance of being able to tell a story with whatever data you have is something to think about, where being a product manager steeped in the data of your product, there's probably a ton of information you could convey, but remember that your stakeholders and your executives are really looking for the headlines, the things that really matter, that just like Andrea said, whether it's the OKRs they're focused on or strategic imperatives that they're really keyed in on. But being able to tell a story means bringing the headlines and then having layers of follow-up information or deeper layers of that data available and accessible while you're telling that story. And then the only other piece of advice I'd put forward for the product managers in this call is just having a point of view and bringing that with respect and some good emotional intelligence to the table. I think will always be respected should be by your executives and your stakeholders, even if it's a disagreement.
Sorry, if I have time for one more piece of feedback here. I would also encourage you have your end consumers, but there may be other stakeholders that are part of the product that you're providing. So who's paying for content to be in your app, for example? And in our case, we often focus on the end user, but we actually, within our app today, we have 3 parties represented: brands that are funding content, end users, as well as, and our end users. So I would encourage people to talk to not just your end consumer, but all the different stakeholders across who's powering your product and making sure that you have all of those voices represented, because if you don't, you might be missing something really important in terms of what one of your key stakeholders might be looking for. So just make sure you have a very well-rounded answer as well, and not just focusing on one particular one particular user of your product.
Can't agree with everything. That's very well said by the team. This is probably our last one before we kick it over to the crowd questions. Is the customer always right? How do you determine which feedback to incorporate and what to ignore? I mean, someone might make some recommendation, some customer might make a recommendation that's great and it's gold and you run with it. And others might make terrible recommendations that you would never actually implement. How do you figure out the difference and run with it, especially leveraging the data and what we've been talking about for this trip or for this talk?
I would say the more pieces of feedback that you can get, the better. I don't go do 2 user testing videos and be like, I've got the answer for the next feature we should build. I would encourage you to do 10. And if there's consistency in 3 or 4 of those pieces of feedback, you might be onto something that you can continue to refine and get more insight into. But if you hear something as a one-off, I would definitely say that's a red flag or a flag that you should probably explore more further. In regards to consistency of that feedback, I encourage people to look at App Store reviews. There's only so much QA and testing that you can do, and you might see threads of consistent feedback within your community that are posting in terms of App Store reviews, or in our case, we have a Facebook user group that's really active that we track often and look for consistency in threads within that feedback in our Facebook community. So I would just, if you can see consensus on a request of a feature or something that maybe it's something that might not be actually working that you weren't familiar with, just look for a big enough core of people to be telling you that or to make that feedback consistent. I would shy away from 2 or 3 users that might have had a bad experience, but if you hear that feedback consistently, it's definitely going to be something you want to look into.
I was going to say maybe as product managers practicing empathy for your customers, the customer is always right to their perspective and their needs. It just might not be totally aligned with your product strategy or your goals that you're trying to achieve. And so everything that Bergen talked about is right on, right? Is to try to look for the thematic feedback or ideas or whatnot that'll help you make that strategic decision. And then the only other thing I'll throw out there is this is why we talked about rapid testing, right? A/B testing, user testing, validation is if there's any controversy, because a lot of times it's not just black and white, whether it's something you're going to do or not. It's sort of iffy, and that's why getting scrappy and testing is so important.
Yeah, thanks, John. Great points. One example I thought of here was we do a lot of client integrations. And so it's not just building and developing for our internal teams. Sometimes it's with client other teams. A lot of times there are middle layers in there. And something I regularly ask myself is, wow, this new feature sounds really awesome, but is it something that I could leverage with my existing clients? Is it a feature that can go across the board, or is this a one-off? If it's something that goes across the board, then it's something I start to have conversations with the business about, and we can prioritize it along the list of other things. So you can take in this information. I have a running list of a bunch of features that clients have brought to us. Great. It's my future roadmap, but we have the opportunity to prioritize it based on what our needs are, what our clients' needs are. So it's a really great thing to have these opportunities come in. It's our responsibility to prioritize them.
Agreed. So this is one question from the crowd. We've got a couple questions. We might not get to all of them, so apologize for that. And then we'll wrap up here shortly since I know we're getting close on time. There's a couple people in the audience who are really interested in becoming product managers. They're not there yet, or they're close. So what would be one piece of advice you guys would give for people who are aspiring product managers to either kind of get into the field, or also once they're in the field using data in their first green product that they start working on? What do you guys think?
I'll start by saying that look, product management isn't a linear trajectory typically. A lot of times you have experience in different areas, you got your foot in the door one way or the other. So I would really encourage you to get those experiences and find what you're passionate about and get into a product that you really care about. You'll ultimately be more successful, in my opinion, if you're passionate about your products, if you use your products. I think that goes a long way. But as far as getting your foot in the door, maybe take an analytics role if a product role isn't available. Do a little bit of technical training if you feel you're weak in that area. To be really well-rounded is a great thing. So there are a lot of different ways you can get into this field, but it can feel limiting at first. So the more you can be broad and expand your ideas, the better.
In regards to getting into the field, if you're already within an organization that you're passionate about, I would recommend shoulder tapping a PM within your organization and maybe seeing that they'd be willing to help mentor you to get into that role, maybe working on a piece of a project with a product manager so you can see what the process entails, but not have to have that in your title. I think as Andrea mentioned, it's not a linear career path. I fell into a role in product management and I never looked back, but I wouldn't have ever been able to do that without some really strong mentors around me within my first role. So I think this community in Denver is incredibly welcoming within the product or the product community in Denver. Join Colorado Product. It's a Slack channel that you can ask any question, ask and get any answer and find mentors through that. So I would try within your organization, join Colorado Product, and there's often jobs that are posted there and you can meet people within those organizations that might be looking for PMs, but try to start on a feature with someone within your organization. If someone asked me that, I'd be happy to help them out.
John, any other wisdom? Final word goes to you.
Just that was awesome. Just one thing would be, within your organization, alongside that mentorship, is get close to your customer. understand your customer and what they want and what they need, and understand your product inside and out. And that'll help as you dive into this journey. But it is a journey. And I don't know that I've ever met anybody with the same background twice in product management. So.
Yeah, I would agree and echo that. Hey, at the end of the day, PMs are problem solvers. And so the better a problem solver you are for your customers and your clients, the better a product manager you'll be. And you'll be able to kind of naturally grow into that role. But I think everyone here would agree that it wasn't a direct path. I don't think actually anyone on this panel started their careers as a PM. All of us, myself included, kind of wandered into it via another path. So Colorado Product's a great resource. Really highly recommend that group. I think we are all part of that group and contribute to the community. So I want to thank everyone for your time today. We've covered a lot of stuff: design, intro to design thinking. We've talked about user testing, A/B testing. And we've also talked about integrating your data from a top-down approach, leveling your goals and connecting them right to your data so you can really read those together. So thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. Hope this was helpful. Hoping to give more talks like these, both through Colorado Products and through our work next year. At Denver Startup Week, we'll have another discussion. So with that, thank you. We will send out the slides. I think this will be posted on YouTube. And I will turn it over for Ryan for last comments from Denver Startup Week.
Hey, Stephen, thank you. Great job, everybody. Awesome to see. I don't have anything else, so you're good to go. Enjoy the rest of the week. There's some new panels, not newer panels. There's some other stuff to check out. If you did your schedule a few weeks back, it may be good to go back through it again and see if there's anything else of interest to you. So thanks again, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.